Hello and welcome to the Bible Difficulties and Answers podcast. I'm your host, Lance Smith. Today, we're diving into the second of our 5-episode series on Abraham. Our focus will be on a fascinating question arising from Genesis 11:32 through 12:1. Was Abraham 75 years old when he left Haran, or was he actually 135? This might seem like a simple question at first glance, but it opens up a world of biblical interpretation and historical context. We'll be exploring two key aspects. Number one, how old was Abraham's father, Terah, when Abraham was born? And number two, does the biblical listing of Terah's sons, Abraham, Nahor, and Haran, reflect their actual birth order? As always, I'll present various perspectives from my research and conclude with my own thoughts. You'll find links to all our sources in the show notes. So are you ready to unravel this biblical mystery? Let's dive in and learn together. Genesis 11:32 through 12:1 from the New Living Translation. Terah lived for 205 years and died while still in Haran. The Lord had said to Abraham, and as we said in last week's podcast, we would refer to him as Abraham moving forward for clarity's sake. Leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. Now, this might seem straightforward, specifically how old Terah was when he died, but when we dig deeper, we encounter some interesting challenges. Here's the crux of the issue as described in the Big Book of Bible Difficulties. Genesis 11:26 states, "After Terah was 70 years old, he became the father of Abraham, Nahor, and Haran." In Acts 7:4, Stephen states that Abraham did not leave Haran until after Terah, his father, died. Genesis 11:32 says that Terah died at 205 years of age. If Abraham was born when Terah was 70, and did not leave for Canaan until Terah died at 205, that would make Abraham 135 years old when he left Haran to travel to Canaan. However, Genesis 12:4 states, "So Abraham departed as the Lord had instructed, and Lot went with him." Abraham was 75 years old when he left Haran. How old was Abraham when he left Haran? Was he 75 or was he 135? So let's explore this problem a bit further. If we do the math based on these statements, if Abraham was born when Terah was 70, and Abraham didn't leave for Canaan until Terah died at 205, then Abraham would have been 135 years old when he left Haran. That's 205 minus 70 equals 135. However, Genesis 12:4 clearly states, "So Abraham departed as the Lord had instructed, and Lot went with him." Abraham was 75 years old when he left Haran. This presents us with a clear discrepancy. Was Abraham 75 or 135 when he left Haran? Both can't be true. So how do we resolve this apparent contradiction? The solution from the Big Book of Bible Difficulties is this. Abraham was 75 years old when he left Haran. Although it was customary to list the names of sons from the oldest to the youngest, this practice was not always followed. Genesis 11:26 does not say that Terah was 70 years old when Abraham was born. Rather, it states that Terah lived for 70 years before he had any sons. Then he had 3 sons, Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. Haran was probably the oldest son of Terah, indicated by the fact that he was the first to die. That's in Genesis 11:28. Nahor was probably the middle son, and Abraham was the youngest. Abraham was listed first because he became the most prominent of Terah's sons. Abraham was 75 when he left Haran. This would mean that he was born when Terah was 130 years old. Back to me. This solution offers an interesting perspective on biblical genealogies and the way they're presented. It's worth noting that not everyone accepts these explanations. The Skeptic's Annotated Bible, for instance, highlights this discrepancy as a clear contradiction in the biblical narrative. They don't offer a solution, but use it to question the Bible's internal consistency. While we won't delve into their specific arguments here, It's important to acknowledge that these questions exist and are part of a broader discourse around biblical interpretation. Simon Turpin, in his December 6, 2022 article, Did Abraham Really Live 175 Years?, says this: However, Abraham was probably born when Terah was 130 years old, not 70. This can be seen from the fact that Abraham was 75 when he left Haran, Genesis 12:4, which took place after Terah had died, Acts 7:4, at the age of 205, Genesis 11:32. Abraham was not Terah's firstborn son, but is mentioned first in Genesis 11:26 because he is most important in the narrative to follow. This is similar to the preceding chapter, where Shem, Ham, and Japheth are listed, this is Genesis 10:1, in an order unrelated to their age. Ham was the youngest son of Noah, which we see in Genesis 9:24. All right, Turpin's explanation aligns with the idea that biblical genealogies don't always follow strict chronological order, but may prioritize significance in the narrative. After considering these perspectives, I believe the key to resolving this apparent discrepancy lies in understanding the listing of sons in Scripture. It's crucial to recognize that biblical genealogies don't always follow strict chronological order. Instead, they often prioritize significance or importance in the narrative. In this case, Abraham, while likely the youngest of Terah's three sons, was undoubtedly the most prominent in terms of his role in biblical history and in fathering the bloodline of Jesus Christ. This prominence explains why he's listed first, even though he may not have been the firstborn. Accepting this interpretation allows us to reconcile the seemingly contradictory information. Number 1, Terah was 70 when he began having children. Number 2, Haran was likely born first, followed by Nahor, and finally Abraham. Number 3, Abraham was born when Terah was 130. Number 4, Abraham left Haran at age 75 after Terah died at 205. The solution aligns with the clear statement in Genesis 12:4 that Abraham was 75 when he left Haran, while also respecting the information about Terah's age and death. While resolving this apparent contradiction, it's important for understanding the text. It's equally crucial to consider the bigger picture. Abraham's age at the time of his calling speaks to God's timing and purpose. Whether Abraham was 75 or older, he was already well into adulthood when God called him to leave his homeland and embark on a journey of faith. This reminds us that God's plans for our lives aren't limited by our age or circumstances. Abraham's story encourages us to remain open to God's calling at any stage of life, trusting in His perfect timing and purpose. This exploration of Abraham's age also highlights some important principles for our own biblical study. Number 1, context is key. We need to consider the broader context of a passage, not just isolated verses. Number 2, cultural understanding matters. Knowing how ancient genealogies worked helped us interpret them correctly. Number 3, apparent contradictions have solutions. What might seem like a contradiction at first glance often has a reasonable explanation when we dig deeper. In fact, that's the entire premise of this podcast. Number 4, the importance of careful interpretation. The example shows why it's crucial to approach Scripture with careful thought and analysis. In conclusion, while at first glance, the Bible seems to present conflicting information about Abraham's age when he left Haran for Canaan, a deeper understanding of the biblical genealogies and narrative priorities helps us resolve this apparent contradiction. Again, this reminds us of the importance of context and careful interpretation when studying Scripture. That wraps up today's episode on Abraham's age when leaving Haran. I hope this discussion has not only answered the specific question at hand, but also provided you with tools and insights for your own biblical study. Next week, we'll continue our series on Abraham with the third of 5 episodes, focusing on Genesis 12, 10 through 20, and 21 through 18. We'll be exploring another intriguing question. Why did God allow Abraham to prosper despite his deception, or more specifically, his lying? It promises to be a fascinating discussion about morality, divine providence, and the complexities of human behavior in biblical narratives. As always, we love hearing from our listeners. You may reach us at our website, BibleDifficultiesAndAnswers.podbean.com, or you may reach out to me directly at our email address, BibleDifficultiesAndAnswers@gmail.com, with any questions, comments, concerns, fits of righteous indignation, or just to say hi. Also, please like and subscribe to this podcast. Tell a friend or two as well. And also write a review and give it a 5-star rating on Apple Podcast, Podbean, Spotify, YouTube, or any of your venues of choice. It really does help get the word out about the most amazing book ever written. Again, I'm Lance Smith. Until next time, I wish you good luck, good health, and God bless. So long, everybody.